I go in order from here. Candy is replacing Johan Wiklund, who is unable to be here, the chief editor. Candy works at Babson, and we're delighted to have Candy here. Right? And next to Candy, we have Sharon. She's going to talk about theory and AMR. Sharon can talk all day about theory, and it's great to have Sharon here. And I've had these conversations since I was a doctoral student with Sharon on theory. Right? Thank you, Sharon. Mark, if I spend time introducing all the editors, it'll take too long. Mark is at AMJ, and his CV and his achievements are remarkable, including winning the Entrepreneurship Researcher of the Year award and decade-long entrepreneurship research performance. Thank you, Mark. And we have Melissa representing SEJ, and then Jeff representing the heart and soul of entrepreneurship journals as well, here seated together. Right? Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Mark, Sharon, and Candy. In any order, please, you could start off, and you can come up here and speak and say, what are you looking for in entrepreneurship papers from your journal and from your perspective? The mic's here. If you prefer to, or I can hand over this to you.
No, you keep yours and we'll pass. That way we don't have to.
Would it come thus far?
We try.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Oh, well, I don't know. Is this going to work for you? So we decided to sit down because it's a little bit more informal this way than if we stand up and actually lecture to you. So Candy Brush, Babson College, and I'm a senior editor at Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice. And Johan Wiklund is the new executive editor. Johan came into ETP editorship in January. The journal had been edited by Ray Bagby for about 30 years. Does anybody know how old Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice is? Anybody? No? It was founded in 1976 as the American Journal of Small Business. And so it's actually one of the older journals in the field. We publish papers on a variety of topics. The mission statement is on the website, and if you are interested in ETP, please go to the website, look at the mission statement. We publish papers on everything from small business to entrepreneurial opportunity to entrepreneurial orientation. There are a whole list of different topics. You can sort of see what it looks like. Generally speaking, the process at ETP, we have we have Johan as a senior editor, four senior editors, and we have 22 other editors who manage the manuscripts. Last year we had 580 submissions, and we accepted about 8% of the papers. The impact factor of ETP right now is 5.31, so it's a good journal, it's risen. And our average review time has gone down to about 60 days, so you get a decision pretty quickly. We have a couple special issues coming up, one on theories in family business, one on entrepreneurship and biology, one on entrepreneurship in the sharing economy, stakeholder theory and entrepreneurship and digitization, and entrepreneurial finance. And so I'll stop and pass it on to Sharon.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So I'm here, I'm an associate editor at Academy of Management Review, AMR. And we have the editor-in-chief who just walked in, so now I have to be really careful with my statistics. But I don't want to bore you too much with the statistics. We're a great journal, so I'll leave it at that. We're a great journal. Submit your great work to us. We'd love to publish it. But that's the thing. We would love to publish it. And the thing that I think is so exciting right now at AMR, the changes that have been made at AMR, is you now have an associate editor that's from the field of entrepreneurship that you can submit papers to, and you can decide whether you get a fair review or not, but you can submit papers to. And that's really exciting. And I will ask for confirmation. I think in terms of just raw submission growth, entrepreneurship has been #1. So we're getting more and more entrepreneurship papers. It's a great thing to have. We just had a special issue, special theory issue, which just got through closing. In fact, I probably let the last scraggler in today. But again, it was on uncertainty, which I think absolutely has an entrepreneurial sort of flavor to it, if you will, influence. And either number 1 or number 2, I think, in terms of total submissions to a special issue in AMR's history. So I'm being kind of Trump-like right now, but that's okay. So the good news is AMR is open for business. It's open for business for entrepreneurship. We love to see your papers. Don't send me crappy papers, please, oh please, oh please. So we have like a 27% desk reject at the editor's level, and at the chief editor, and at the associate editor we have another 10% rejection. I really want to publish entrepreneurship papers, so that's why I tell you, please, oh please, oh please, see what's being published, understand how it's being published, understand what we're looking for. And there's different ways of thinking about this. You don't have to have, there's propositional types of theories, and there's theories that aren't propositional, and we're open for business on that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. There's lots of things to echo from AMJ's side. We are the empirical sister of AMR, which means we are soliciting empirical papers, but they should have a strong theoretical contribution. And compared to the field journals, JBV, SEJ, ETP, and others, we are general management journals, just like Chris Tucci will talk about AMD in a minute, which means the paper should be relevant, should speak to ideally a broader audience. Because think about the academy, all the different divisions we have here. When you want to publish an AMJ or any general management journal, it's good advice to frame your paper in a way that allows you to speak to multiple audiences. And I think that's one of the key differences among when you write a paper for one or the other outlet, meaning a specialist journal or general management journal. And both can have great impact. I know it's just a different type of impact you probably have. And it's a different type of paper you need to craft, from the introduction up to the contributions. We probably have time to talk about this later on. We have 18 associate editors, 2 to 3 handle typically manuscripts in innovation and entrepreneurship, so that's a significant number. We had the previous editor was Jerry George. He was an entrepreneurship innovation scholar, so he left definitely his mark on the journal. I'm serving as a deputy editor there. We have 2 deputy editors, so entrepreneurship in that sense is since a longer time represented in the leadership of the journal, which also is reflected obviously then in the types of papers we get, because people say, well, that's an entrepreneurship scholar who's on that board, or several ones. They can competently judge my work. So I really want to encourage you to send your best work if it's empirical and you want to publish in a general management journal to us. And with that, I hand over to Chris.
Thank you very much. I'm a little hiding here behind the podium. Maybe I'll stand up. I'm Chris Tucci. I'm at EPFL in Lausanne, Switzerland, along with Mark here. And I am here to tell you a little bit about Academy of Management Discoveries. I apologize. The scheduling system quadruple booked me for this session. So I actually am running around like a little ping pong ball from place to place. I'll have to leave as soon as I make my pitch. But let me make my pitch. Let me just say that, it's very difficult in the management area in general to publish phenomenological research. So studying a phenomenon, which I think is very important in entrepreneurship. On the other hand, it's not so easy to convince people that you're making a theoretical contribution when you're studying something new. And I can give you my own example of, I still am very interested in corporate venture capital. And I had all these papers, collected all this data on corporate venture capital and trying to understand different aspects of it. What are the benefits to the recipient, et cetera, et cetera. And I got many, many rejections basically saying, that's a prominent partner. We already know, so we don't care. All we know is that a startup has a prominent partner. It's good for them, so case closed. And even though I thought, well, this is really interesting, companies taking equity stakes in these companies. So it's in other fields, it's absolutely normal to have, in many other fields, it's normal to have phenomenological research. Some of the most impactful articles in other fields are actually measurement articles, and without knowing in advance the underlying mechanisms of what's going on. So you may have a hunch. And so that's why we, in AMD, we take the abductive approach, trying to explore the phenomenon and trying to figure out a plausible explanation, rule out other plausible explanations, and then eventually discuss the theoretical implications, toward the end. And in most cases, it's not desirable to retrofit hypotheses once you know what your results are, right? And so in some cases, people will collect data, they're interested in the topic, and then, you know, certain people will actually then, okay, let's see, what kind of hypotheses can I generate that will be consistent with this? Worse, sometimes the referees will say, hey, I've got a better theory for you that fits your results much better, you know? So in this case of AMD, you don't need to do any of that, right? We're not interested in the hypothesis testing part of it. And that's the sort of so-called abductive approach. It means that you basically have this hunch. Why did you collect the data in the first place? And then what are you going to do? And then what are you going to do with it? And how can you rule out all the different explanations by doing a variety of empirical tests? So that's the approach that we're doing. We have 6 or 7 editors. I happen to be one of the people who handles the technology innovation management, entrepreneurship, and strategy type papers. Georg von Krogh just joined this month, and so he'd be another editor who would be inclined to receiving entrepreneurship type papers. And we have a few other editors who also handle different kinds of methods, experimental methods, qualitative research, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a wide variety of people who can handle it. And then finally, I just want to say we have some special issues coming, including one on digitalization. And some of you who might be interested in that, you can send me a message or come to our special session on Monday where we actually sit around with authors and talk about the special issue, and you can pitch ideas to the editors of the special issue. So I think it's Monday at 1:15 or something like that. So let me stop there. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Melissa here.
Thank you. So hello. I'm happy to tell you a little bit about Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal. So Academy of Management Discoveries, which Chris was introducing to you, I think is the youngest and newest journal represented in our panel here, and SEJ would be the second youngest. It's been around for about 10 years. SEJ is a journal of the Strategic Management Society, so it's kind of a sibling journal of SMJ and GSJ. And the way that we're structured, we have 3 co-editors instead of a single editor-in-chief or executive editor. So it's myself, Gary Dushnitsky, and Chris Zott are the 3 co-editors. And then we have a great group of associate editors. In the last year and a half or so, we've added a bunch, which are names that are probably familiar to you: Ben Campbell, Yong Lee, Dan Elfenbein, Ishan Guler, Anu Wadhwa, and Peter Klein. Peter Klein is not only a wonderful AE, but also one of his papers won our Best Paper Award, which will be presented at the SMS conference in Paris, if any of you are going to that. So our mission is to publish excellent work at the intersection of strategy and entrepreneurship. And I would say we define that fairly broadly. If you have good work that relates to entrepreneurship, we'd love to see it. Some of our accomplishments in recent years that we're excited about as a newer journal. SEJ was added to the FT50 recently, which is great for visibility. We get about 300 submissions a year, or at least in the last year, and that's been tracking up every year. The acceptance rate's about 6 or 7%. There's different ways to calculate that, but it's somewhere around there. We have special issues coming up on history in the study of entrepreneurship, on entrepreneurship in emerging economies, and one on meta-analyses. And so those 2 calls are still up. We have one that will be coming out that's sort of going through the review process right now on organizational design and entrepreneurship, which is really interesting. I want to put in, finally, a special pitch. Does anyone do qualitative research in this room? All right. So although I am a co-editor, and most of our manuscripts we send to the associate editors after an initial screen, but as a qualitative researcher myself, I am acting as associate editor for, at this point, almost all of the qualitative manuscripts that we get, because we really see that as an area that is so important in entrepreneurship research, and we're trying to get great reviewers and really take a developmental approach to qualitative work. So I hope you'll consider SEJ for your great case study or interview-based research.
Hi, I'm Jeff McMullen, and I am an entrepreneurship scholar. I say that somewhat jokingly because sometimes I feel like we have to apologize for it as if it's somehow we're second-class citizens. I want to speak to you. The reason I love JBV and the reason I love this field is because I am a management scholar. Yes, that's true, but my heart is first and foremost entrepreneurship. Why do I share that with you? Because I think it transcends management, and JBV transcends management. We overlap with management, and we love all that management research. We'll take all that. But if you are not in management, if you're in econ, if you're in psychology, if you're in finance and accounting, we take those papers too, and they will get reviewed by people that know finance, accounting, psychology, economics. I think it's important. I deeply believe that the journal needs to be a market, not a club. If your work is good work, if it's solid work, it's asking interesting questions, it will get a fair shake and it will get read by people who know that work, who care about that work, and they don't care where you're from. I'm not going to pay attention to what university you're from. If the work is solid, it's interesting, it's impactful, it will get heard, it will get a voice. It will presumably, if at all possible, all the journal articles come into me and then I give them to a field editor that is the most appropriate field editor I can find. Somebody who believes in what you believe in, is studying that, is as much a match as possible. If I feel like there is an area that's underrepresented, or you feel like there's an area that's underrepresented, I'd like to hear about it because we need a field editor in that space that knows that. I want to eliminate biases in entrepreneurship. I think if you're doing excellent work, you should have a chance to see that work read by people that care about those questions. And that's something we're deeply committed to at JBV. The reason, so far it's been working extremely well. I will say that Dean started much of this years ago by taking a big tent approach, trying to be multi-contextual, multi-level, multi-field. And I'd like to extend that, and if you look at our impact factor, it's gone up every year. We're up to 6.0 this year. It was excellent. AMJ was at 6.7, just to give you comparison. We competed really well against all the unequivocal A's in strategy and OB. We were higher than them in impact factor. It's not the only statistic, by the way, so when people say that impact factors can be gamed, which is very difficult, by the way, you can compare the other metrics too. We compete there. I'm telling you this because I think it's important to realize you don't have to say, I'm a strategy scholar who does work in entrepreneurship. I'm an OB scholar who does some work in entrepreneurship. You can say, I'm an entrepreneurship scholar and I'm proud of it because I do world-class research. I think that's the message. That's my number one message. It's even more important than JBV. JBV will stand by that, and we will continue to make sure that that holds true. So when your work is published in JBV, if it's evaluated by people outside, they're going to read that article and say that's an excellent article. It's both thoughtful, it's relevant, and it's rigorous. And we don't want to sacrifice on either of those. A couple quick things. JBV's been around since '85, so we're not as old as ETMP. I love ETMP. Ray Bagby's one of my closest friends, and so is Candy. I will say that we, just a couple final, we do have special issues coming out. We have had a couple on pro-social organizing, one on experimental methods that's underway, and one under well-being. We've been judicious historically on special issues just because there are issues with special issues, that sometimes things come in the back door and the process isn't the same. I'm open to proposals from you all. If you have a really interesting proposal that you feel like could create a toehold or give leadership to a movement that's already out there and you would like to submit that, we give a proposal the same kind of review that you would give an article. Largely it goes to like 3 field editors. They give feedback to me and then I write up a letter to that extent. So I invite those proposals. I'm pretty sparse on the ones we accept because I just don't want to fill the journal with special issues and only special issues. If it's on entrepreneurship, you're going to give a fair shake anyway. You don't need a special issue to do that. The special issue should be to consolidate a voice and get a community going, and that's kind of the idea behind that, or to give a voice to a community that didn't have one before. With that, I'll turn it over to any questions that you might have. One final thought. We accept qualitative papers, theoretical papers, quantitative papers. If it's on entrepreneurship, we're interested in it. And it's that simple. If you hear otherwise, then contact me directly and I will set the record straight. I've written in each of those areas, so trust me. If we're not, then I'm cutting my own legs out from under me because I work in each of those areas as well. So I want to see your work in any of those areas. Critical studies. If it's out there, I'm still interested. I think it's cool. If it's pushing the boundaries, it's entrepreneurial. It's entrepreneurship research. We want to see it. I'll stop because I'm monopolizing, so thank you.
Thank you very much, the editors. May I give you 5 minutes to just have an informal conversation in the group so that we don't get the first question, or you don't get out-socialized by the people who ask the first question, to raise some issues informally and then go to the editors. And may I also ask editors, that doctoral students in the room, if you could advise them about reviewing and how to serve the field and enter the field as well when you get to this. We give them a couple of minutes and they'll come back to you.
Hi, we had a question at our table about AMJ and the comment that AMJ articles should speak to multiple audiences. And we were a bit curious because a lot of AMJ articles we read are on specific, either a theory or a phenomena, let's say human research management or more OB or social network analysis or more strategy. So that seems already to imply a specific audience. So we were wondering, is then the theory that should be general and could be used by multiple audiences, or is it more a phenomenon that multiple audiences are interested in?
It can be all of these things. When I say it should be appealing to a broader audience, it means the question that you're asking is of a more fundamental character, so that other people get inspiration, for instance. So when you let me give you a concrete example, because otherwise it remains too fluffy. I had a paper on identity and entrepreneurship, and this is a paper where I looked at founder identities and how that imprinted the firm, and the emerging venture. So from that perspective, this was a new lens. Of course, there was social identity research for the last 30 years or so, but the particular way in looking at this had then many other implications for back to identity research, because it was a novel type of context, these emerging ventures, how they shape organizations. It had implications for organizational identity research. So it was an entrepreneurship paper, but it has multiple implications that move beyond entrepreneurship. And these are audiences, the org theorists, the org behavior, identity theorists, social psychologists that can be addressed with this paper. So in that sense, there was a broader readership. Let me make another comment regarding this, because oftentimes what I see as an editor is we get papers where the framing is too narrow, while the scholar could have framed it more broadly. What do I mean by that? So if you study entrepreneurship, you see that serial entrepreneurs are quite good in framing their ventures, looking at the venture from multiple sides and not only being like a hamster in a wheel. They look from the venture to the outset. That's what many studies looking at the entrepreneurial mindset have shown. And I think in a similar way, a good scholar can look at his paper from multiple perspectives and basically switch it around and say, hey, if I frame it that way, maybe there's a more general contribution there. As an editor, I can help shaping, that rough diamond, if you want to say so. But I need to see first if there's something. I can help you shaping the paper to become more broader. But I would like to see an attempt that there is something in there that can be more broader, because oftentimes, if the diamond is too much buried into the soil, I don't have too much digging equipment to get this out. I've also limited time. No, but that means, I think for many entrepreneurship papers, you can apply this logic to say, maybe there's something more general, maybe I can look at it from a different angle, maybe I can use this as a context. Oftentimes, entrepreneurship is a great context to study things that are not studyable in large organizations. So give me another example. I did a lot of research on opportunity identification. This is something where in an entrepreneurial setting, you have 3-4 people, can measure their prior knowledge, you can understand what they identified, etc. If you would study the same phenomenon in a large organization, this would be quite different, because there are 30 people in a department, they talk to another 50 people, and suddenly this is extremely messy. So even if we want to inform more general management research, I think entrepreneurship provides a nice setting. But that means also as well that you need to understand your paper probably in a different way. And that's where I think it's actually a beautiful process to be able to shape and turn your paper as you want, because that means you really understand your topic.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Here you go.
Okay. I mean, sort of any of you all could answer this, but I'm curious, when you're making the decision as the editor, given that no paper is perfect and sort of the best cases R&R, minus, I think Kathy Eisenhart said one of her 89 papers was accepted in first round. But other than that, and I'm not Kathy Eisenhart, what in a paper really makes you think I'm willing to give the writers of this more opportunity? I mean, sometimes it's like, okay, yes, we're AMJ and we want theory, but I like the back end and so extend the theory. Or sometimes your theory's right, but you need to work on the empirics. What really calls to you when you're making that decision to give the writers the latitude to get a revision?
So I think it depends a little bit also whether you're more of a general management theory or more of the entrepreneurship specific areas. But you know, when I look at a paper, and I've overridden my reviewers, but I look to see, is this interesting? Is this something novel? Is this something that I didn't know before I read this paper? Did it make me go, aha, right? And I look for that first. And then I agree with Mark, and again, AMR has a very similar, right? We're a general management journal, so you have to do something or tell me something that takes what you've learned from this particular aha that now translates back into the broader literature somehow. I also look for under-theorized areas. Again, some of that might be a function of being entrepreneurship, and not that if I get whatever, because it's an under-theorized area, I'm willing to say yes, but I'm actually willing to maybe go a little extra mile to try and help develop that if I can. But again, there has to be something really interesting, so just because it's under-theorized doesn't, right? It has to be something that makes me sit back and say, you know, I didn't think about this before I read this paper. And the paper could be rough. And I've got one of those, by the way, right now. I told the author to sort of get out of his or her way. But their core premise changed the way I thought about things. So.
And so I'll repeat, Sharon, something interesting. In other words, what is an interesting question? But besides that, because ETP publishes both empirical and theoretical papers, we look for novel insights into theory and novel data sets that might shed light on some new phenomenon or might be of interest for exploration. So, sort of building on what Sharon just said, is there something there that makes you say, I didn't know that before, and I've never thought about that, and this is a real novel insight for what we think about in the field, or it's a novel data set that might really shed light on something that we didn't know before. So the Murray Davis, that's interesting, is something that I'll repeat, and I'm sure Mark and everybody on the panel will probably say that as well. So I'll pass that to Mark.
Okay. I already spoke, so.
Oh, you already spoke.
Let's.
So I agree with what's already been said. I was just going to add a couple other things. So when you're an editor and you're trying to decide whether to give a paper an R&R, whether it's at the first stage or even if it's already a revision and you're trying to decide on a second R&R, you think about the cost of doing that to the reviewers and especially to the authors. So there's an assessment of, okay, if the authors go back and put a lot of work into this and I ask the reviewers to look at it again, what's the probability that this is going to amount to something? And so you're making a combination of judgments about what's the current state of this manuscript, but there's also this very subjective piece about how good do I think, how capable do I think these authors are. And so one way that you can signal that is just with the writing. Just make sure that your paper is well written, because that gives the editor more confidence that you're going to be able to pull this off. The second piece of that, which is particularly important for qualitative papers, is the data. So qualitative papers that are taking an inductive approach, it's very common for the framing to change quite a bit during the review process. So I don't really expect with a qualitative manuscript that they necessarily have the right framing in the first round, because I know as an author I usually don't. But I do want to see that they've collected a significant amount of data. If they've done interviews, have they interviewed the right people that would actually have information about what it is that they are studying? And if there's a really good data set, then I'm inclined to give them a chance to revise, because if you've got a really good qualitative data set, there's almost always something interesting that can be teased out of it.
It's a tough one to go last on. I guess I would just add a couple things. Is it timely and relevant? What I mean by that is I'm a voracious reader, just obsessive, got to have new information. I read about 200 books a year on average, for real, on every topic, and there's no way that I could gauge everything of what's interesting. So what I look for, are there fatal flaws in it? Will the data support some of the claims that are made? And then I'm going to try to find a field editor that is a specialist in that particular area, because what is interesting is socially constructed. There is no objective answer to what is interesting. So what is interesting to me is going to be different to somebody who's a specialist in that particular area and knows what the boundaries are and what the knowledge frontier is. So it's important that I think it's interesting as a general reader, and then they find it interesting as a specialist in that particular area, but they know it's not just reinventing the wheel. So it's going to go through that process to some extent. And then I did a lot of the answers that were given in the sense that, you can see, is the writing going to be able, are these authors going to be able to deliver? If the writing is just, it needs a translator in the first pass before that should have already happened and it hasn't happened. There might be good science there, but I can't even get to it. The writing's so poor in some cases. By the way, that's not a statement about being a native English speaker or not. I have native English speaker friends that hire copy editors because they know their writing needs work, that it's all passive voice. I don't know where's the subject, who's doing what to whom. They know that, and they're willing to make that investment and pay because they know that matters. If the reader can't read the paper, they can't even judge or evaluate whether it's a rigorous design and all that. They're not going to make that effort. People are doing this for free. You're doing this for free. You're reviewing each other's papers. If you're a reviewer and you get a paper and there's typos and grammar errors all in the abstract, you've already made a big decision whether you know it or not. Now you're going to read for an hour or two and rationalize the decision you've already made, which is that this paper probably doesn't deserve an R&R. So there is no field. You are the field. What do you do in that situation? How are you going to respond to a poorly written paper that comes across your desk? Are you going to give it the benefit of the doubt when you have 5 other things to do and a million things going on? Or are you going to read that paper when it's polished and they've made some mistakes? You're going to give the benefit of the doubt in that case, right? Because you feel like this person really did the best they could, and it looks like with a little bit more, there could be something here. So make sure you send in your best quality work. If you want to give it a shot, you're asking 3 people and an editor to give up their Saturday, probably. That's how I think about it. That's a big ask. And they're all doing it voluntarily. That means they're not spending some time with their family, their kids, whatever hobby, whatever they're doing. They're giving it to you to read your paper and give feedback. So you want to make sure you give them your best effort when you send that in, because that's the right thing to do. And so if you do that, then it's hard to really argue. If it comes back and you get 3 poor reviews or they say it's not interesting, you did your best shot. You at least know the ideas were evaluated, not some trivial garbage. Then people rationalize and make an excuse of why they rejected the paper. So it's not what you want to hear, because it puts the burden back on the author. But ultimately, the burden's always mine. It always comes back to me as the author, right? If I don't make it clear, even if they didn't get it, it's still my fault as the author in the end. And it's just it's an accountability check that it's painful, but it's the nature of what we do. Sorry, that was a downer. Sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, maybe this is a more general question, really. So what, in terms of, because before Howard Aldrich said, you should always aim high, start at the top, etc. And so then, you've given it your best shot, and you get reviews, and they kill your paper or whatever. So and then what do you do with those reviews if it's rejected, right? So if it's an R&R, you're going to try and solve everything. But if it's a reject to a journal, what would be your recommendation? Like, do you try to solve these issues nevertheless? Do you think, okay, I'm gonna, so if there's some obvious flaws pointed out, of course you're gonna deal with them, but how much time would you spend on the paper before you then go and give it another shot, basically?
So I'm going to give a short answer to this, and then I'll pass it on to others. But I have come to believe that there are times when a rejection is a blessing. It's a gift. And the reason is, if you have reviewers that just don't get what you're doing and want you to take the paper in a different direction, then I would rather know that and have the paper be rejected. We have, multiple good journals. And then you have the opportunity to look at the feedback, and you have to give it a fair shake. You have to say, okay, they were right about this, and I can fix that. But you can also say, they were wrong about this, or it's not the audience I want to speak to, and I'm not going to do that particular piece. If you get an R&R, you kind of have to deal with all of it. So nobody likes to get a rejection, but when that happens, I think you need to try and see the silver lining, which is, I don't have to do everything that they're suggesting, which is kind of liberating.
There's an additional aspect to this, which is the fit with the journal. Some papers we get don't fit the journal very well, because the conversation happens elsewhere. It might be too narrow, it might be too less theoretical for AMJ, but it would fit elsewhere. So in that sense, it's in a way the author's task before he or she submits, or before that team submits, to actually figure out if that journal presents a good fit. And in order to do this, you engage with the journal, you read the journal. Often it's a good indication if the conversation that you want to join is happening at that journal. So you look at the types of papers you're citing, and if there's only AMJ papers, then that's a strong signal that there's the conversation. If it's no AMJ paper, in my case, then you might say, oh, maybe it's not happening there. Maybe there's a reason why this conversation is not happening there. So in that sense, make sure that you also know your target journals. If the types of flavors, the types of ways they write, these papers are written, etc.
So I actually want to piggyback a little bit on something Jeff said earlier, and a little bit of what Mark is saying. The reason it is so important for the Academy journals to have reviewers and to have an editorial board that reflects who you are is because if you're at any kind of a decent school, I shouldn't say it that way. If you're at a research intensive school and you want to make tenure, you probably have to have at least one of those publications. And so, to echo what Jeff said, you want to make sure that there are people on that editorial team, that there are people on that editorial review board who are in a position to fairly evaluate your work, because Jeff's right, things are socially constructed. And so you want to make sure you have that. Now, if you do that, if you make sure that that's where you want to go and that you're actually getting a fair shake, and you get rejected. And by the way, rejection, I've heard Jay say this numerous times, rejection is certain, publication is rare, right? So chances are you're going to get rejected, especially if you come to AMJ or AMR, right? I mean, the rejection rates are high. But what you hope is that you get really good quality, insightful reviews. And you take those reviews and you look at them. Some people are better at taking things and not taking them personal. Some people have to put them away for a while. But you look at the reviews and you say, okay, here's what I can fix. Here's what I don't want to fix. Here's what I want to hold on to. And here's what I can't fix. And you revise it. Now, you revise it, right? Because the last thing you want, and I've had this happen to me as a reviewer, the last thing you want is to get reviewed at JBV and rejected and then have the paper sent to ET&P and have it go to the same exact reviewer that just rejected your paper and you haven't made any changes. That really makes me mad, right? As a reviewer, that makes me really angry. And so how likely do you think I am to say, this is a great paper, maybe we should give it an R&R to the editor? 0. So change it, make the changes, look to see. You know, the reviewers, and maybe you just have to clarify things, but make the changes, make some changes at least.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing, but I'll say something different because Sharon just said it. One thing tactically is that when you get the feedback, again, read it, get angry, put it in a drawer, write all the comments that you want to back just to get it out of your system, and then come back and reread the reviews and really think about what they're saying. The editor's comments are going to frame what the reviews, you know, sort of the whole story of the paper. And they'll usually let you know that there's a serious problem, that you really need to fix this. It's the theory, it's the data set, whatever it is, or fit, as was mentioned, because fit's very important. But then after that, you can figure out sort of what's editorial and maybe what's not editorial. Then, if you're a junior person, I would take it to a senior person on your faculty or somebody that you've worked with and have them take a look at the reviews with you. Because in the end, like Melissa said, it's your choice to figure out what to fix and what not to fix and where to direct that piece of work. But sometimes it's really helpful to have somebody else take a look at the reviews and help you determine, you know, how serious the problems are and whether you need to reanalyze the data or whether you have an incorrect theory or whether you need to collect more data or whatever it might be. So sometimes a senior person can help you figure that out.
One last question. Mark, you wanted to add something, Mark?
He does
No.
now.
Okay.
Let's hear another question.
Hi. As a PhD student, for example, at our university, we have the choice of going for a compilation thesis where you have to write papers. My question is, how much bargaining power as a PhD student you have over the pathway you take in your papers? For example, your 4 papers or 5 papers have to make sense together, they have to speak to each other. And if the reviewers want to take you in a different direction, that is totally not syncing with your PhD. How do you go about this, and how much bargaining power you have with the editors or with the reviewers to try to pull them back to the direction you're taking, which works well with your PhD? Thank you.
I can give it a shot. No, I think the question needs to be rephrased. How much bargaining power do you have with your PhD commission? Because if you come to me and say, Gruber, I have this paper, and you tell me to go in this direction, I back this up. This is my opinion. This is the opinion, oftentimes, of the reviewers too, and we think there might be a stronger contribution in that direction. You can say, I don't care about this, I do it the other way, you resubmit, and, well, let's see what happens. But, I would go to your commission and say, look, I have this revision with ETP, SEJ, AMJ, whatever. This is a great opportunity. This is a fantastic signal for my future career because I'm only a PhD student right now. There are few PhD students who publish in these journals. I have this great opportunity. Give me advice. What shall I do? And that's how I would approach it. Don't start the fight with the journal, because it's not our job to make sure that you get a dissertation.
About the doctoral students and how they can come into the system as reviewers and how they can serve among the various journals and how they should go about the reviewing really quickly, and then we can end the session.
Yeah, so very quickly, Sharon and I were having an offline conversation about the extent to which we use, AMR and ETP use PhD students as reviewers, and mostly we do not. And so, because when you submit to the system, if you've submitted a paper, we know that you've submitted a paper. If you get something published, you do. But we would rarely use PhD students unless you were a content expert, say you're a mathematician, you really understand FSQCA or whatever it might be, and we need a third or fourth reviewer, we might add that person, or crowdsourcing, as Sharon mentioned. So how do you get into the system and how do you get experience? Well, a good place to start is with like this meeting, because this meeting always needs reviewers. Other conferences require reviewers as well, and so you can practice in those areas, and then when you have completed your PhD, you can let one of the editors know that you've finished your PhD, you're joining XYZ school, and then we can bring you on as an ad hoc reviewer into our system. So that's my short answer.
But I am going to also give you an example. This was when I was a editor at SEJ, actually, and we did a special issue. And somebody had contributed to the special issue, and it was a pretty specific point that they had made. And I had another paper, and I wanted them to review the paper. And that person wrote back to me and said, "I'm an assistant professor, and I don't have time to review for you because I'm too busy working on my own papers." Yeah, and what was your reaction? Not good. Mine wasn't so good either.
Why should we publish your
Yeah,
paper?
why should we, right? So one of the things that I think is also important to remember is, and it's easy to say, oh, I didn't want to review for Academy. I wanted to review for, the big journals. But you have to be part of the community first. We are a community, we're a community of scholars, and you have to be a member of that community first, and you will become established. And let me tell you, I sat next to Mike Hitt this morning. Mike Hitt was a full chaired professor when I was a doctoral student, and now I'm sitting next to him. You guys will all be sitting where we are sitting, hopefully sooner rather than later, right? So you have to build community. You have to be a community of scholars. And you have to remember that when you're reviewing too, right? You cannot judge people's work by your own aspirations, right? So you have to be a good reviewer. You have to be a good community member.
Maybe one thing that might not be so apparent to you, that we as editors, we evaluate the reviews as well. We get your reviews. And at AMJ, we have a 5-point system. One is excellent, maybe a future candidate for the editorial review board, and one is, you can guess what it is. And if you have a 1, it will be stored in the system. If it's a 5, it will be stored in the system, and the system nowadays doesn't forget. So if you have aspirations, to become a reviewer, to join the editorial review boards, it pays off to spend time on the reviews, do constructive, positive reviews. There's different types of languages you can use. I tend to see, if in case I rarely send out to PhD students, but if I do, I send to those where I have some feeling, understanding that they are positive, because PhD students tend to be a bit harsh sometimes. And you need to know that there's no perfect study. There's always something in any study you can read, even the published ones where you say you could have done it better. But that's normal. You're doing something innovative as a scholar, and you cannot foresee all the major problems that will happen. So there might be some problems that you can address with a very in a constructive way, where say as a reviewer, well, you can do this estimation technique, or you can do this robustness check, and then this problem is gone. And there are other problems that might persist. But but make sure to understand that this is, the perfect study never exists, and try to understand a second thing, which is don't be dogmatic in your worldviews, in the sense that if there's a study that's fairly new, maybe the methods are not perfect, the methods are credible, so you can trust the result, and that's all we need. Yeah? It doesn't have to be always the Kolmogorov, Smirnov, Gruber, Alvarez, and Candy Brush estimator. It can be different types of estimators you use to come to a trustworthy result.
I just have one small thing. A really great review does more than just say what's wrong with the paper. Anybody can do that. That's Sam Rayburn, the old House the Speaker from Texas, used to say any jackass can knock down a barn. It takes a carpenter to build one. So, I mean, it's easy to say what's wrong with a paper. A truly great review actually does that and then stops and says, what would I do? What could I suggest to fix the paper? And when you read those, you're like, oh, now this is somebody who took some time. They wrote a good review. I mean, they really, because that's hard. I mean, that requires sitting down and thinking about their paper, actually putting yourself in the shoes of the author, going and being empathic enough to do that and go, can this be salvaged? What could be done? And not to be commanding or coercive. If you can do it, like if you could actually come up with two things and go, I mean, these are just suggestions, and frame it that way, then it becomes clear that you're not telling the person what paper to write. You're just thinking, here's some possible ways that this could be salvaged. That's a great review. So if you can do that, I know it takes more time, it's more effort. Don't worry, you're not giving up your research ideas. People know in time that it's not there's not the curtain that you would think. I mean, giving people, the community knows in time that you're a giver. If you're somebody who gives ideas, helps people, nurtures that, it gets out. So it's not just given. You're not just being exploited or used. So you're not going to give away your precious idea. If you only have one idea, by the way, you need a new career. Hopefully you can come up with more than one idea in this business. So try to be generous like that, and it will come back around. You'll actually stimulate your own research, because it'll force you to actually think things through that you hadn't thought of before, because that wasn't really your stream of thought. You picked up somebody else's stream of thought, tried the hat on, saw if you could extend it a little bit, and you thought about something in a different way than you probably would have ever thought about it before. So I look at it like that. It makes reviewing a lot more fun too, because then it becomes a creative act, not just an absolutely critical act, which is draining and exhausting and tiring. But you get that part done, and then you have some fun with, like, here's what could really be interesting if you're able to do it, if you have the data, if you have the theory, whatever, if you have the time, the interest.
Last words. I think a lot of great points have been made. I would just add, for those of you that are doctoral students, so number one, I wouldn't rush into reviewing, because it actually, does take a lot of time, and it's not such a bad thing to wait until you have a job. You can certainly review for the academy, but once you're sort of, either a very senior doctoral student or assistant professor, talk to your advisor and say, hey, I'm interested in doing some reviewing, because senior people in the field, and I'm sure everyone on this panel has been asked to do many, many reviews, and you do get to a point where you're on a bunch of editorial boards, maybe you're an associate editor, and you get more requests than you can feasibly do. And so that's the point where I would think, oh, I'm getting, someone's asking me to review this paper. I happen to know my doctoral student is studying this topic and is, an expert on the state of the art. And so I'm going to decline this review, but I'm going to suggest my doctoral student who's, about to graduate, or maybe is a assistant professor, would be a great substitute. And so that's, one pathway where you can start getting involved as a reviewer.
Okay. May I thank the editors for their time and Davos. May I also recognize the other editors in the room, Gary, who's hiding back there, my brother Phil, who is the field editor at JBB, and the newest chief editor, the youngest chief editor, I should say, in tenure compared to the others. Yes, on the chief editorship, Jay. So thank you all for joining us. If you have questions about OrgScience or other journals or AMR, along with Sharon, please feel to catch them before they dash off. And we have a social at 5:30, which is across the road. One second, we'll pull up the location for the social that we go to, and we welcome you to join us at the social as well. Huh? Thank you again.